It started from a lesson that I learned from Kobe Bryant back in 2007. He said, the best never get bored with the basics. And ever since that day, I really strengthened my appreciation and respect for the fundamentals. You know, whatever area of life I'm looking to improve, the very first thing I do is I narrow it down to the basics and the fundamental building blocks of what it takes to be excellent in that area. And then I work relentlessly on mastering those basics during the unseen hours. And all of that tied together, I believe, is how we simplify success. I think, generally speaking, society often nudges us to overcomplicate things. And I know that I've made most things in my life way harder than they needed to be. I'm also a big believer that complexity undermines execution. And whatever area we're trying to improve, whether you're trying to improve your marriage, you're trying to improve your business, you're trying to improve at a specific craft like speaking or podcast hosting, execution is the name of the game. It's not what we talk about, it's what we implement and what we can execute on and what we can put into action. And if complexity undermines our ability to execute, then my number one goal for myself, for my children, and everyone I work with is to help them simplify that process and ultimately simplify success.
This is Sparta!
Welcome back to the Spartan Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Josh Kosnick, and this is your podcast for leadership, inspiration, and impact. Today, you got to buckle up. This is going to be a high-impact episode, and I'm so excited to have Alan Stein Jr. in the studio. Let me give you guys a brief intro in case you've been living under a rock and haven't heard of this man. But he has spent his career inside some of the highest performing environments in the world. Alan Stein Jr. is a former elite basketball performance coach who has worked with NBA players, coaches, and organizations at the highest level. He's taken everything he learned in those pressure-filled environments and translated it into leadership, mindset, and performance strategies for business leaders and teams. He's a two-time author of Raise Your Game and Sustain Your Game, and his work focuses on something most people talk about, but very few actually understand, which is how to perform consistently at a high level when the pressure is real. So what I'm most interested in today is his philosophy around the next play mentality, how high performers move forward without getting stuck in the past, whether it's success or failure. So without further ado, Alan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Josh, it's so great to be with you, man. I'm excited for a fun chat and have been looking forward to this since we put it on the calendar.
Me as well. I got to start with, you got success simplified right behind your noggin. What does that mean to you?
It started from a lesson that I learned from Kobe Bryant back in 2007. He said something to me that fundamentally changed my perspective on how I approach everything. He said, the best never get bored with the basics. And ever since that day, I really strengthened my appreciation and respect for the fundamentals. You know, whatever area of life I'm looking to improve, the very first thing I do is I narrow it down to the basics and the fundamental building blocks of what it takes to be excellent in that area. And then I work relentlessly on mastering those basics during the unseen hours. And all of that tied together, I believe, is how we simplify success. I think, generally speaking, society often nudges us to overcomplicate things. And I know that I've made most things in my life way harder than they needed to be. I'm also a big believer that complexity undermines execution. And whatever area we're trying to improve, whether you're trying to improve your marriage, you're trying to improve your business, you're trying to improve at a specific craft like speaking or podcast hosting, execution is the name of the game. It's not what we talk about, it's what we implement and what we can execute on and what we can put into action. And if complexity undermines our ability to execute, then my number one goal for myself, for my children, and everyone I work with is to help them simplify that process and ultimately simplify success.
Speaking to my heart, I'm an EOS implementer as well. We didn't discuss that, but we literally talk about less is more all the time. And one of the the 5 leadership principles that we teach, the first one is simplify.
Yeah.
So it is my dad taught me growing up, the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid.
Yes.
That's speaking to it. You brought up Kobe though. This just came to heart. This will be my first ADD piece of today, but I have never cried over a celebrity death. I cried the morning first it was shock, but then there was the grief that came with it. And I don't know, I still, I've pinpointed a couple things, but one being a girl dad and the way and the manner that he died with his daughter, I couldn't imagine. But also, I think part of it was that he didn't rest on his laurels of being the best or one of the best ever. He would, like, his next act was already like escalating him in different areas of life. And you having that relationship with him, I just wanted to bring that up and see what thoughts came to mind for you, because I think we got cheated as a society with how he was ascending and showing us how to live outside of the basketball world and what he was transitioning to next.
Oh, absolutely. That's so insightful. And I share many of the same sentiments and feelings. I think he embodied and modeled so many characteristics that many of us should attempt to emulate. I mean, there's only going to be one Kobe Bryant, and certainly not suggesting that any of us try to mimic or be anything other than our most authentic selves. But what you just said was so true. I mean, he gave everything he had to his initial craft of being the best player he was capable of. And, by most analysts' projections, is one of the top 3 or 4 players in the history of the game. But then he took that to something else that he found a lot of passion in. I mean, he certainly took that to fatherhood and being a girl dad, but he took that to the arts and to the children's books and the documentaries and the movies and the things he was working on. He's someone that lived his life to a standard of excellence. And that's certainly something I think all of us can use in some shape or form. I think it also that such unexpected tragedy, tugs at our heartstrings also, because on some level, we probably unconsciously thought a guy like Kobe was immortal. Like there's nothing that could ever happen to somebody like that. I mean, you're talking about a warrior and a champion on and off the court. And when you realize something like that can happen to him, then we're all snapped back into reality of realizing, oh, that could also happen to me. So as tragic as it was, I try to pull the good from it, which is what a powerful recalibration reminder that nothing is ever promised in our life. I mean, I just turned 50 a couple months ago, and I have the optimism and the delusion to believe I'm going to live another 50 years. I put a lot of emphasis on my physical health and emotional health and well-being, and I think I'm only at halftime of my life. I got another 50 trips around the sun, but saying that with a huge smile, I'm going to live my life and prepare as if I'm going to be here for another 50 years. But you better believe that I know consciously that none of that is promised, that this whole thing could be over for me tomorrow. And when something like that happens to someone of Kobe's stature, it is a powerful reminder of that. So I try to live my life thinking in both of those regards, live my life with the enthusiasm and the vigor and the enjoyment that it could all be over tomorrow. But at the same time, plant the right seeds and lay the right bricks now, especially for my physical health and well-being, that I could live another 50 years of a very robust and vivacious life. So it's what's hardest for me to believe is that it's been 6 years now. I mean, it doesn't seem like that was 6 years ago. That seems like something that happened, a few months ago, and 6 years has already passed, which again is another reminder of how quickly time can pass.
Yeah. I was taught early on when I had my first child, the days are long, but the years are short.
Yeah, that's so accurate.
And the more they grow and the more life we live, it becomes more and more true. All right. So I usually start with a backstory, but I got distracted with your nice sign behind you. What were some of the defining moments that shaped how you think about performance today, especially moving from the basketball world into business and leadership that you're so prominent in now?
Boy, there were several. I mean, for context for your listeners and viewers, basketball was really my first identifiable passion. And I fell in love with the game at 5 years old. And I'm really grateful that here 45 years later, basketball is still a major passion of my life. And I'm so grateful that I've been able to build both a life and make a living around something that I've loved since I was a child. The first portion of my life, I was a very dedicated basketball player. And at that time, I had some really influential coaches and positive people that poured into me that really planted the seed that when my playing days were over, coaching might be the path for me. Now, at the time, I took what was considered an unconventional path because I was a basketball performance coach. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, there weren't very many of us. Today they are. I mean, every single NBA team, every single collegiate program, men's and women's, and most elite level high schools have full-time performance coaches on staff now, but that's in 2026. That was not the case in the late 90s and early 2000s. In fact, when I graduated college in the late 90s, less than a third of NBA teams even had a strength and conditioning consultant. And that person, I'm not kidding you, was usually a bodybuilder at the nearest Gold's Gym to the arena, just someone they figured knew something about lifting weights. So to see how far that industry has come has been a really fun ride. But, I had some people that poured into me that I thought, man, coaching seems like an awesome way to impact lives and stay connected to the sport that I love. So being a basketball performance coach was kind of birthed from that. Another influential time was around the same time in the early 2000s when I read Coach K's first book, Leading with the Heart. And that was a very impactful book. It really reframed how I viewed leadership, how I viewed being of service, how I viewed building elite level teams and organizations. So that was impactful. And then I've had a few other landmark spots, along the journey, but they all share one common thread, and that someone was kind enough or cared enough to pour into me and to I like to say, light my candle. And now really that's what I view my vocation as, is trying to light other people's candles. At present, I do that in the form of giving keynote talks and leading workshops and writing books and posting content on social. But my goal is to leave the world better than I found it, and to pour into people and share things. And the cool part is the overwhelming majority of stuff I share is not my own IP. I mean, this is stuff that I've learned from other people. This is stuff that was mentored or taught or shared with me. And then I'm putting my own version of it out into the world to pour into someone else and to pay it forward. So I'm very grateful to do what I do for a living. I take a lot of pride in it, get a lot of enjoyment from it, but it's all because of people that have done the same thing for me.
Yeah, that's so good. And you've been around some of the most elite performers of all time, whether it's business or basketball. Is there something, or what's something they do consistently that most people completely misunderstand?
I don't know necessarily about misunderstand, but there are several traits that they all share. And that's what's been really fun about kind of leaving the basketball world and transitioning over to the business world, and then noticing that high performers in business share the exact same traits as the high performers in basketball. I mean, if I listed the top 10 reasons Kobe was as good as he was, they're probably very similar to why the leading entrepreneurs or business owners or executives in business today, they're doing the exact same thing and have the exact same traits. Now, obviously, there's some nuance between basketball and business, and the way you apply some of those traits is a little bit different on the court versus in the boardroom, but the fundamental traits themselves don't really change. And, really the base of that pyramid is having an unbridled passion for what you do, or having an unbridled passion for your specific craft or industry, or having an unbridled passion for making improvement and developing, because if you don't have a passion for what you're doing, it's going to be really hard to put in the requisite work during the unseen hours to get good at it. I mean, the reason Kobe was able to put in those types of hours was because he loved the game of basketball. I mean, he loved the game itself, but he also loved the challenge of trying to conquer the game and to improve his skill sets and to leave his legacy and his mark. So to me, the passion has to be there. And this stems back to arguably the best piece of advice I've ever received in my life. I was fortunate enough to receive in middle school. And I had a middle school coach tell me that the key to not only high performance and success, but the key to living a fulfilled life is finding what he called your strength zone. And he said, your strength zone is the intersection between what you naturally love and have a passion for, and what you're naturally pretty good at and have some talent in. And when you can find where those two things intersect, that's going to be your strength zone. And we all know the importance of leaving our comfort zone in order to improve. But if you really want to find your groove in life where you can leave the best mark, it's going to be what you love and what you're naturally pretty good at. And if there happens to be something that you love, but you aren't very good at it, like say singing or golf, those can and should be hobbies. Those can and should be things that you still devote time to because you get so much enjoyment from it. But if you weren't really born with the cards to be an elite level singer or an elite level golfer, you're probably not going to ascend to the highest level of being elite in those areas. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So for me, it all starts from that passion and finding what you're naturally good at. And that's the base of the pyramid. And I know that every high performer I've ever been around certainly shares that quality.
Yeah, you're speaking. I mean, that's so profound, because what most people do is they end up taking the degree that they have and thinking they have to go into a job in that world, or they fall into a job and they end up being kind of good at it. And they realize at some point they really don't like it. And so we do this study when we're doing Delegate and Elevate in EOS teaching, and we draw out a quadrant. So the upper left is great at and love. Mm-hmm. Upper right, good at and kind of like. Bottom left, good at but don't like. And the bottom right, of course, don't like, not good. Well, 95% of the population spends their majority of their time in they're kind of good at it, but don't like it. And that's a staggering statistic. And we never, like, very few people actually wake up and go, okay, where is that cross section that Alan was just talking about? And how do I move myself to that upper left quadrant so I can actually not only leave my mark with what I'm great at, but really find enjoyment in the work that I'm putting in this world?
I love that. That quadrant is so powerful. And not only as a North Star as we navigate our individual lives, but that's also a very powerful quadrant to use for improving organizational and team success and performance as well. Because when you have your team, let's just say a business, for example, that has 30 employees, so a smaller startup, and you kind of look at each person's roles and responsibilities. If you have them fill out those quadrants, there can often be times where you can shift responsibilities to a teammate or a colleague, and you actually both win. If you happen to love numbers and love math and love spreadsheets, yet that's something that falls under my responsibility, and yet it's in quadrant 4 for me. I'm not very good at it and I don't like it. The mere act of shifting it over to making that part of your responsibility now relieves me of something from quadrant 4 and adds something to you in quadrant 1. So it's a double win, and we'll be so much more efficient and so much more fulfilled just by making some of those subtle changes. And getting that clarity. And for me, at 50 years old right now, my number one North Star is always quality of life. Like every single decision I make in my life of what I choose to do and not do and who I spend time with, it all comes down to quality of life. And I really try to stack the deck so that most of the things I do and most of the people I invest time with are adding to my quality of life. And I say most of because perfection isn't realistic. And if it was, it's not sustainable. I'm not going to act like every moment of every day of my life is pure bliss, but I try to line it up so that I spend most of the time doing those things. And even in my business now as a keynote speaker, I have a very small internal team. I have a manager and an agent. I have a full-time assistant who is my younger brother and manages my social accounts and my email list and books my travel. I've got a bookkeeper. I have a few people on my team, and I have them for a very specific reason. They do all of the things in quadrants 2, 3, and 4 for me that I don't like or don't want to do. And they happen to be things that they do like and they are very good at. So I get to only invest my time, as far as my business is concerned, into the things that I have to do because it's my business, and the things I really enjoy doing and I'm pretty good at, which is preparing to give keynotes, actually giving keynotes, writing and creating content, and investing in relationships. Those are really the only things that I do in my business because I've outsourced everything else to people that do it better than me and actually enjoy those tasks. So we're in a pretty good groove now for our very small team.
Well, so I want everyone to pinpoint what he just said there. He identified 4 things. I think I counted those in my head, but you identified 4 things: preparing keynote, delivering keynote, creating content, and investing in big relationships. I get them right?
That's
all
it.
Right.
That's 4.
So those 4, like, it should be 3 to 5 things that you are just world-class at, and you just continue to get better and better in those areas. Now, here's one of the fallacies that a lot of leaders have. That stuff that we in the bottom right quadrant that we don't like and aren't good at, a lot of us think, well, no one's going to like that stuff, so I kind of just have to do it. I had that fallacy when I was 25 years old when I hired my first assistant. I'm like, who's going to want to fill out my paperwork and make sure it's all accurate and do all the computer work that I don't like to do? And my COO at the time looks at me and she goes, Josh, look around the office. There's people like that everywhere, and they actually really enjoy the perfection and making sure that everything's right. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. and I hire my first one and she was a home run. Now that doesn't always happen either, but she loved doing that stuff and it allowed me to do the stuff that I love. So don't fall into that fallacy either. There's a question I want to ask you because I asked both Drew and David this question about the zone or flow. And they both had a pretty similar answer because I asked a question in the manner of how do we find that more? And they both basically said, well, Josh, that's $1 trillion question. If we had that answer, we'd be trillionaires. So I'm going to ask it differently of you. So I named my company Kairos, and I don't know if you're familiar with that word or terminology, but it's a Greek word, and it's a moment or defining era. And they had two Greek gods, Kairos and Chronos. And Chronos is the time that we live off of in the calendar and the clock. And Kairos is the time that God really lives off of, which is omnipresent outside of time, space, or matter. And but Kairos in this, and I wrote the Kairos Code as the book, and I'm trying to identify places where we can find more Kairos moments in our life where we're not worried about the time. Like, the athletes that have been in zone or flow, or you've been in zone or flow in your life, you have no concept of Chronos time when you're in zone or in flow. So I'm curious, I'm not going to ask you the question of like, how do we create that? But like, how do we potentially find more moments where we can get into that defining moment, defining era, or zone or flow? What are the conditions that need to be present for us to be able to do that?
I first of all, I love the name of your business and love the rationale behind it, but I really love the way you structured that question, which is, all right, if we meet in the middle and acknowledge that we can't control when we'll be in flow, because if we could, we'd all be in flow all of the time. How can we stack the deck to increase the frequency and number of occurrences of being in that flow? And how can we create patterns and environments and habits and behaviors to increase the chance? So you and I are perfectly aligned in how we approach it. Well, first and foremost, flow can only exist in the present moment. So, there's a saying, if you want to win the moment, you got to be in the moment, which means being present is the first prerequisite to flow even having a chance. So at that time, well, I do believe there are times where we should be looking back to the past to learn lessons. And I do believe there's times where we should look ahead to a presumed future to prepare. But outside of that intentionality, I do believe that most of the time, most of our faculties should be on the present moment and on the here and now. So first and foremost, we have to learn how to be present. And I don't know about you, but that's still one of the biggest struggles of my life. I mean, I'm constantly feeling, and this is all self-imposed, that I'm being tugged between the past and the future, and I'm not really where my feet are. But I will say with a huge smile and a tremendous amount of pride that I am more present more frequently now than I have been at any previous time in my life. So I'm far from being a Tibetan monk, but I'm better than I've ever been in my own life. So I know I'm moving in the right direction. So the first prerequisite is certainly to be present. I would say the second prerequisite is to be prepared, is to have put in the reps. If you're trying to get in the flow of basketball, have you earned the right to be in the flow by putting in the reps during the unseen hours? Have you, the reason you can watch someone like Stephen Curry for a quarter appear to be completely unconscious, just knocks down every single shot, regardless of where the defense is, regardless of where he is on the court. Well, that didn't happen by accident. That happened because he's made more shots in empty gyms over the last 2 decades than any human being walking the earth. So he's got the muscle memory and the competence to have that type of confidence in that moment and to increase the chance of being in flow. And, for me, there are times when I'm on stage that I'm in flow. It just feels effortless. I feel like every word I'm saying is perfectly articulated, and I'm kind of leading this dance with the audience, and it's amazing. It's one of the best feelings ever. Now, there are plenty of times where I don't feel that way when I'm on stage, but I know that the times that I do is because I'm present and in the moment, and because I've put in the work to prepare myself and prepare my material and rehearse and to be in that moment. So to me, those would be the primary 2 prerequisites. And then the last one would be, and this kind of comes from meditation, kind of comes from yoga, and that is letting go of judgment, untethering from the need to have a specific outcome or the need to have a specific result, and just allowing it to unfold and to just be. And that's something else that, in full transparency, I often struggle with, is untethering from desired results and desired, outcomes, and not judging myself in the moment. Not, if you're a basketball player, not getting upset because you missed the shot. That's part of the process. That's part of the game. And don't drag the negative energy from the last shot you missed into the next shot you take. And a lot of this really is the major tenets of having a next play mentality. But for me, those would be the big three to increasing the chances of flow, is being present, being prepared, and untethering from the need to have a certain outcome.
Yeah, that's so good. And it reminds me, so I'm privileged to be mentored by Ed Milet, and he has a trigger. So I'm curious if you have a trigger. If anyone's ever seen Ed speak live or any of his clips, you'll notice at times on his stage, he snaps. And what he's told me with that is that he's triggering something. He's either locking in a spot where he's in flow, or he's trying to trigger his previous memory of flow to bring that energy to the stage. And he's one of the highest paid speakers in the world. And I was wondering, like, when you've been in flow where everything's just seamless, like God's pouring through you and the right words at the right time are hitting the audience, is there any triggers that you've gone to or try to lock in those moments?
No, that's very insightful. That's something I'm gonna sit with. I don't have a trigger for when I'm in flow, but I absolutely have one for when I'm not. And it's a saying that, and I always say this with a huge smile, because I don't know who to give proper attribution to. I heard this from Oprah and I heard this from Nick Saban, and both of them said the concept of be where your feet are. I noticed that anytime in my life when I'm not fully present, when I'm not in the flow, that's the internal trigger to myself, as I remind myself, Alan, just be where your feet are. Be where your feet are. If I'm with my children, but I find myself on my phone, I'm like, all right, well, I'm not giving my kids the full attention they deserve. Let me put down the phone. I need to be where my feet are, because I'm a big believer. If you're going to be somewhere, well, then be somewhere, get all of your faculties in alignment. So I need to give some thought, because I'm a huge fan of Ed's, and I need to give some thought to how I can develop a similar trigger for when I am in those moments of flow, so that I can hopefully either extend it or be in it more often.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's just taking those little pieces and figuring out. I've heard of other people, pressing in between their thumb and index finger because there's a pressure point there and it locks in a memory, or doing something, a physical trigger of some sort can lock in certain things from a neuroscience perspective. And I've also got to figure it out, but I just know his. So,
and the phrase next play, that's another one that I use dozens of times a day. And that's, for me, is a recalibration and a reframing of when things don't go my way. So, I still play basketball as a weekend warrior. And, when I miss a shot, the very first thing I say to myself is, all right, next play. Like, I don't let it linger. I don't worry about it. If an event that I really want to speak at is narrowed it down to two speakers, you and me. And then I get the email that says, we've decided to go with Josh. As much as that stings and as much as that hurts my ego and my pride, and as disappointed as I may feel in the moment, and I allow myself to feel those things. I don't suppress them. I don't resist them. I don't ignore them. I allow emotions to go through me. But I eventually go, all right, next play. I didn't get this speaking engagement, next play. And that is something I say to myself all of the time. I mean, anytime I say or do something that's not in alignment with the man I'm trying to become, or anytime one of my preferences or goals isn't reached or met, I just say next play. And to me, that has been another really powerful recalibration and reframing tool. So I'd probably say internally to myself, next play, a couple dozen times a day. And I say, be where your feet are to myself a couple dozen times a day as well.
Yeah, I have a trigger as well in that regard, is be the best hour of this person's day, or be the best hour of their day. And so literally I went from a coaching call to our podcast, and in between, it's just real quick, be the best hour of Alan's day. And as I told you, my mastermind's coming here at 11, going to trigger transfer. It helps me switch from thing to thing, go and be present to, okay, your job right now is to be the best hour for this person in front of you. Yes. Or these people in front of you. And that's my trigger. But you said something really important I want people to grasp. You're not just saying next play. You also said, I allow myself to feel the emotions, and then I say next play. And I want, because we have a lot of male listeners, a lot of high achievers. I think women are innately better at this. Us men try to bury the emotions or not try to feel them at all. You said something very important. The emotions are real. You feel them, and you say next play. Just talk really briefly about that, because so many men that I coach are blocking emotions or not feeling them because they were told as a young person they're not real, rub dirt on it, all those, cliches.
If you are getting ready to go for a hike and you're going to go for a 5 or 6 mile hike, and in the beginning you have a little pebble in your shoe and you can feel it, and it's not tremendously painful, but it's a little bit annoying. You have two choices. You can stop right then and take the pebble out and finish the hike without it, or you can pretend it's not there and have this nagging, annoying pebble in your shoe for the next 5 miles. And that's kind of how I view those emotions. If you try to bottle them up, resist them, and ignore them, they're still there, and they're going to come out at some point. So it's better to go ahead and diffuse it and let them run through you now, and acknowledge them and manage them, and remind yourself that it's okay. If I wanted to get this speaking engagement and they decided not to go with me and hire you, and as happy as I am for you because you're a friend, I'm allowed to feel disappointed. Mm-hmm. I'm allowed to feel upset, or fill in the blank. I'm allowed to feel jealous. So I don't put a governor on my emotions and say that I can't feel. I'm allowed to feel however I naturally feel. Now, the most important trait I believe we can develop as human beings and as leaders is the ability to separate how we feel from how we behave. So I'm allowed to feel upset that you got the speaking engagement. I'm allowed to feel jealous, disappointed, whatever. It doesn't mean I have the right to behave that way. It doesn't mean I have the right to fire back an email. You guys are idiots for hiring Josh. You should have gone with me. Man, I hope your event sucks. Like, even if that's what I'm feeling, I don't have the right to behave that way. So I try to behave to a standard. I try to behave and make sure my actions are in alignment with my core values of the man I'm trying to be, but I still allow myself to feel however I want to feel. I have twin sons that are literally turning 16 next week. And I have had this talk with them so many times, because anyone that knows twin boys know that there's an inherent competitiveness. They like to fight. They like to pick at each other. They like to argue, and they love each other, but they've been that way their whole lives. And I've had to remind them so many times, Luke, you're allowed to be upset at your brother. You're not allowed to punch him. Like, you're allowed to be angry at him, but you're not allowed to curse at him and call him names or try to disrespect or diminish him. So the ability to separate how we feel from how we behave is really important. But I want to make sure that I feel everything. Now, in my latest book, Next Play, when I was doing some research, I found something really important, and I can't for the life of me remember the exact study. So if someone wants to look it up, I'm sure you can type it into ChatGPT. But there was a research study that found that the average visceral emotion only lasts about 90 seconds. That's it. So if you let stuff just run through you, if you're slightly irritated because the Starbucks barista messed up your order that morning, you're allowed to be irritated by that. But if you just let it run through you and just accept that that's part of the human condition, generally speaking, 90 seconds later, it's not going to be that big a deal. The problem with most people, and I was guilty of this for the overwhelming majority of my life, is they keep starting that stopwatch over and over because they keep feeding the flame. They keep, the Starbucks barista messes up my order and I'm upset. And, 30 seconds into feeling upset, I start the clock over because I can't believe this happened to me. Don't they know that I've got this really important podcast that I've got to get back to? Yeah. Clock starts over. God, look at this kid. He's covered in tattoos. He's got 19 earrings. This kid is apathetic. He doesn't care. I'm not surprised he messed up my order. Starts the clock over again. So we keep feeding these with these false narratives and these false stories, and we end up elongating it. And I've joked around with people because I was this person before. Josh, if at 8 a.m. somebody messes up your Starbucks order and you're still grouchy at lunchtime, that's a you problem. That ain't a Starbucks barista problem. That's a you problem. You haven't been able to manage and acknowledge and deal with your emotions in a very healthy way. And this is something that I'm really heavily focused on in my own life now, because in full transparency and not trying to turn this into a therapy session, one of my self-soothing mechanisms is I leave my heart and I go to my head. and I analyze and conceptualize everything. And I try to resist feeling unpleasant feelings. I try to escape that by going back to my head. And that's just like the example I gave you earlier. That's me walking around with a pebble in my shoe. So now in every area of my life, I'm really trying to sit in the discomfort of unpleasant feelings. When things aren't going well or something doesn't happen that's not my preference, instead of trying to escape that and find some type of escapism like doom scrolling or binge watching or other things that could be way more detrimental, instead I just try to sit with those feelings and go, you know what? This is uncomfortable. It's unpleasant, but it's making me stronger and I'm going to be okay from this. And I want to learn how to sit with and be with even the most unpleasant of feelings, because it will build me back stronger. And, I've always known as a basketball performance coach, if I want to make the muscles of my body stronger, I put them under uncomfortable stress and then they'll build themselves back stronger. Well, if I want to be mentally and as emotionally as strong as I can, then I need to do the exact same thing. It's like doing push-ups. If you stop doing push-ups the moment it starts burning, you're not going to really get stronger. It's the push-ups you do after the burning starts, after your arms are shaking and your chest and triceps feel like they're on fire. Every push-up you do after that, those are the money makers. Well, it's the same thing with my emotions. When something happens that I feel anxiety or I feel upset or I feel angry, I try to sit with that because I know that emotionally that's going to make me stronger, and I don't let it dictate my behavior. And the last thing I'll say, and I really went off on a tangent, is I heard this several years ago and it really resonated. Our emotions are designed to inform us. They're not designed to direct us. And that's what I look at every single emotion as, is just simply data. See, I don't use the label of good or bad emotions, right or wrong emotions, because I don't think those are appropriate labels. Certainly there are emotions that we'd prefer not to feel, and I call them unpleasant emotions, but there's nothing bad about them. There's nothing wrong. We have every emotion for a reason. And as I just said, I look at every single emotion as completely neutral, completely sterile. I give myself the permission to feel how I'm feeling. And then I make sure that I'm very conscious, intentional, purposeful, and deliberate in how I choose to respond and how I choose to behave despite how I'm feeling.
I love the tangent because it's well needed to be understood. And it really helps, get you into the next play mindset. I was thinking as you were talking there, like if you've ever wondered why you came home and, a simple thing your kid did and you just lashed out, well, was it perhaps that you didn't process the emotions from that Starbucks screw up earlier this morning? That's where it came from. This buzzword triggered has come about over the last few years. And as I dissected more and more people that said they were triggered, I started to realize your triggers are your responsibility, not society's.
Yes.
Right? Your emotions are your responsibility, not society's. So, and then I identified a specific example. So my father-in-law in 2018 died by suicide. So I have one trigger that I know of, and I'm sure I have more, but this is one that I can specifically point to. When someone makes the quip or joke that I'd rather kill myself than do that, or if they hold a fake, their finger gun up to their head and shoot, that bothers me viscerally. But I don't make that their problem. They don't know that I've had that life experience. They don't know that I've gone through that grief. So I deal with that and move on. And so you got to identify what your triggers are. You got to identify what your emotions are, and you got to process them. They're your thing to deal with, not society's, not your kids, not everyone else. So I love the tangent. It was well needed. Let's pivot to high performance and with leaders. A lot of high performing leaders say they want to create environments, or they say that creating environments are impossible like that. What are some of the most common ways leaders sabotage their own teams as they're trying to build high performance cultures?
Anytime a leader models behavior that's not congruent with what they say, that's going to be a problem. That's going to undermine their credibility. I mean, in a perfect world, our behaviors and our words are going to be fully aligned. But if they're ever misaligned, people will always believe what you do over what you say. So one of the most common ones I see, especially in business, is the leader preaches to the fact that, hey, I want you all to have balanced lives. I want you to have family lives. I don't want you to just work all of the time. It's important to be present in your marriage and to be with your kids. And they say that. and then they send you an email at 10:30 at night and they expect a reply immediately. Well, how am I, if you're not respecting the boundary of I'm off the clock and I'm at home with my family, then those two things aren't very congruent. And, that can take in a few shapes. And one, and this happens all of the time. Again, they say, we want you to have balanced lives. We want you to be present for your spouses and your kids. And yet they keep giving promotions and rewarding the people that don't have any balance. The people that work 24/7, they don't have wives, they don't have kids, and they're working 18-hour days. And then everyone else watches that person get rewarded for behavior that's not congruent with what they just preached. And then the other is, I punish you because I sent you an email at 10:30 last night and you didn't respond. Like, what's up, Josh? I needed you to get back to me. And you're thinking, yeah, 10:30 at night. Like I don't even check email then. So to me, the leaders that aren't modeling the behavior or their actions are not aligned with their words are going to undermine credibility. And then that's going to just start pulling the thread out of the sweater for the rest of the organization.
Yeah, that's so good. Just like our kids, they will follow our actions far more than our words.
Yes.
And that's for any leader that's a parent. Parenting and leadership are completely analogous.
Oh, yes, very much.
And so you got to draw those parallels, and what creates a good parent will also create a good leader and vice versa. And so drawing those parallels, and now you do have to talk to adults differently than you do kids, but there's a lot of parallels that you can draw.
Parallels is meet people where they are,
Yeah.
and so that goes to what you just said. There's obviously some nuance between the way you would talk to a 6-year-old and the way you talk to a 36-year-old. But both of them, as a leader, you need to meet them where they are. And yeah, it's all comes down to modeling. I don't give my kids a keynote speech on being respectful. I just make sure that I carry myself in a very respectful manner. I'm respectful of myself and my boundaries. I'm respectful of them and their opinions and beliefs. I'm respectful of people on social media. I'm respectful of the person at the valet or the waiter at the restaurant. I'm respectful of the environment. I'm respectful of, I carry because respect happens to be one of my primary core values, but I just do my best to carry myself in a very respectful manner. And that's what's modeled for my children. So I don't have to give them a PowerPoint presentation on it. I just see me doing it. And with that being said, I've said this before, but it's worth a double click. Perfection is not realistic. And if it was, it's not sustainable. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that every single thing I've done in my life, I've modeled perfectly for my children. I haven't. I've stepped out of bounds and turned it over and messed up several times. But when I do, I try to use that as a learning opportunity. And I explain to my kids, hey, being respectful is a very important value of mine. And I was just disrespectful to that person. That was not my best moment. And I remind them that as human beings, we're flawed and we're fallible. So none of this is about, getting all straight A's and making 100% of your shots. It's about doing the best you can with what you have wherever you are. And when you do mess up, because you're human, then you acknowledge it, you own it, you make amends if appropriate, and then shameless plug, you move to the next play.
That's right. That's right. Well, I know you've dealt with high performers in business and basketball. We've covered that, but I want to ask a question about identity, because so many people wrap their identity in either their title or position. And actually, the first time I suffered some depressions when I stopped playing college football, because I went to college to play football, not to go to college. And so my identity was completely wrapped into being a football player. And that was the first time when I chose to stop that I suffered that. But then, as I told you, when my firm was ripped away from me, another piece of my identity was ripped away from me. And so I've gotten on this mission of going, hey, what we do is just a piece of the puzzle. It's just a piece of it. So how do you separate identity from performance in a world where results are constantly being measured and judged? Like, these high performers are constantly, and most of the time, it's not the outside world that is really affecting them. It's their internal world where they place their identity in either being an NBA player or a CEO.
Yeah, well, what you just said is really hard. And some of it I do think is a natural rite of passage. I mean, I shared that same sentiment as a basketball player coming up. And the reminder of what I do is not who I am is a really important one. And but conceptually, I didn't have the emotional maturity to even grasp that concept, even up until my 20s, to be honest with you. I mean, maybe I'm a little bit of a slow learner, but that is part of the process, is the untethering from what you do or your title, your accolades, and who you actually are as a human being. And there's nothing wrong with aiming for excellence and aiming for high performance in that specific area, especially if it's something that you're passionate about. But just remember that is not who you are at your core. And the untethering from, I need to perform and get results in order to be worthy of affection or worthy of love or worthy of people to care about me. Again, as I continue to acknowledge all of the struggles that I've had in my life, that's always been one that's challenging for me too. I mean, even presently at 50 years old, I can easily click on my performative hat, and I know who I need to be in certain areas of my life to get that little head tap and that little back rub and to get that accolade. And that's an area I'm really focused on in my life now, of redirecting, is reminding myself there's nothing wrong with striving for high performance, but I'm not dependent on it for my self-worth. I'm not dependent on it for my confidence, and I'm not dependent on it certainly for my identity. And, once you have through life experience, I mean, you were a football player and then you weren't a football player. You were a managing partner and then you weren't a managing partner. Once you go through that a couple of times, then the school of hard knocks reminds you that, hey, you played football, but that wasn't who you were as a human being. Yeah. You were a managing partner, but that's not who you were as a human being. And now that you keep having success in these other areas, that's a good reminder of that. So some of it, I think, just comes through experience. I mean, I was a basketball player and then I wasn't. And then I was a basketball performance coach, and then I wasn't. I'm presently a keynote speaker and author, but maybe if you have me on your show in 10 years from now, maybe I won't be at that time, and that's okay. But it's definitely that untethering has always been very challenging for me.
That's what always not bothered me, but just confused me, is people that don't strive for success because they're afraid they may not actually get it. Because I look back at just the managing partner piece and being taken away from me. I didn't forget how to be a leader.
Oh no!
I didn't forget how to sell. I didn't forget how to recruit. I didn't forget how to build an amazing culture. Like, those are all things, because I strive for that, I learned those things along the way. And those are still skill sets and characteristics that I carry with me today into the next venture. But so many people get stuck at the starting line because they're afraid they'll fail on the journey and forget about the journey teaching them all these lessons of who they're going to become next along the way.
Yes. And part of that is, I think, the mistake and the pitfall and trap that many people fall in is they let society or let other people define success for them. Where I believe success should be an internal decision, not an external metric that we have to live up to. I mean, there are certain boxes that you can check that most people will agree mean you're successful. You have the title and the job and the income and the house and the spouse and the kids going to college and all those things. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things, but that doesn't necessarily automatically qualify you as a success in my book. And if you don't have those things, it doesn't negate the fact that you can be successful. To me, it's internal. I shared earlier with you that my primary North Star is quality of life. Like, my primary North Star, am I physically, mentally, and emotionally fit? Do I have deep, nourishing relationships with people that matter to me? Do I do work that I consider meaningful and impactful on others? Like, if I can check those boxes, then I'm living a very high quality of life and a very fulfilled life, which for me means I'm successful. I mean, I know the sentence of me standing here saying like, hey, everyone, I'm successful. It sounds self-righteous and it sounds arrogant, but it's not. It comes from a humble place. It comes from the place of, I've decided what I believe is successful, and I've dedicated my life to pursuing that. And yeah, I'm not going to let someone else tell me that I'm not. And I can say all of that without anyone knowing any of those other external metrics. Like, my success is not dependent on how many stages I'm on, how many books I sell, how many Instagram followers I have. Now, do I want to improve each of those metrics? Absolutely. I would never pretend otherwise. But do I let them define my success and my self-worth? Absolutely not. And I can say that now with conviction because for 4 decades of my life, I absolutely let external metrics dictate my self-worth and my self-confidence and whether or not I thought I was successful. I mean, I have tremendous autonomy in my work. I love what I do. I have a great connection with my children. And for context, I'm divorced. That's the reason I keep referencing children and not referencing a spouse, because I don't have one. But I have great friends. I do work that I love and find meaningful. I have plenty of discretionary time to pour into my health and fitness. I still play basketball very regularly. Like, I have a very full, wonderful life, and I'm very grateful for it. I don't take any of it for granted, but that's how I would define success. Do I have the bank account that Ed Milet has? Nope. Do I charge the same thing for keynotes? Nope. Do I have as many followers? Nope. But that doesn't mean I'm not successful, So to me, that's where it all starts, is us defining success for ourselves.
And you didn't mention money in that definition, which a lot of people do. And so, yes, do you want to improve your bank account? I'm sure that's on the list too. That being said, you're not defining it by money, which so many people do. Success has so many different definitions other than money or accolades.
Yes. Now, money plays a role in quality of life. The things I can and can't do, and the ability to provide for my children, to be able to have a secure future in place, or at least a perceived secure future in place, those things do increase quality of life. And I'm a capitalist at heart. So don't get it wrong. I mean, I work very hard for the money that I earn, and I try and grow my business like most business owners do. But it doesn't mean that I let those things define me. If this calendar year in 2026, if I earn less speaking income than I did in 2025, that doesn't automatically mean this was not a successful year. And it certainly doesn't mean that I'm not a successful speaker or business owner. It's just, that's the data, and that's what unfolded, and that's what happened. And because I can untether from outcomes and stay focused on the process, then I'm okay. So to me, success has way more to do with the process. And have you designed it? Are you intentional with it? Are you committed to it? Than the outcomes. Like that, the outcomes aren't near as important. And the last thing I'll say on this, I'll wrap it up with a basketball analogy, since that's the world I was in. Good coaches understand that a shot is either good or bad the moment it's taken. It has nothing to do with whether it goes in. Now, fans only clap when the ball goes in for their team. But if I'm in rhythm, I'm in range, I use good form, I'm wide open, and it's appropriate to time and score, and I shoot a good shot and I happen to miss it, it was still a good shot to take. It was still the shot that my coaches and my teammates want me to take, because it's a high percentage shot. I just happened to miss it. Where conversely, there can be times where players are a little selfish and their heads down and they're dribbling between their legs, and another teammate's wide open, and yet they chuck up a prayer and it still goes in. That's an awful shot to take. We do not want you to take that shot anymore, even though it went in. So the reason I'm saying that is that's very akin to this analogy of success. Just because you have the external trappings does not automatically mean you're successful. And just because you don't doesn't mean you're not.
No, that's so good. All right. Before I ask you my last question, where can people find you, book you, get your books?
So AlanSteinJr.com is kind of the hub of everything that I do. I'm also at Alan Stein Jr. on the primary social channels. I'm very accessible and very responsive. So shoot me a DM on Instagram or LinkedIn if any part of this conversation resonated, or if you want to ask a question or share a story. And then also on the website, if you're interested in exploring keynotes or workshops, or how I can work with you or your organization, there's information there. And then lastly, any of my books, Raise Your Game, Sustain Your Game, or my brand new book, Next Play, can all easily be found on Amazon or Audible, or wherever you get your books and your audiobooks.
Awesome. All right. The last question I always end with is and this can be on anything we've discussed thus far, or whatever comes to your heart, but what's an unpopular belief you hold to be true most others would disagree with?
I don't necessarily know that it's one others would disagree with, but I think it's one that others just gloss over and they don't look at the importance of it. And there's really been two that we've talked about. The first is this idea of complexity undermining execution. I think on a conscious level, most people do agree that the more complex we make things, the harder it is to do it. And yet they spend all of their days and all of their lives making things unnecessarily complex. So they know it, but they don't live it. And then the other is, as we talked about, this separation between how you feel and how you behave, and the ability to regulate your emotions. As you alluded to, I do think a lot of people, specifically males, believe in suppressing, ignoring, and resisting emotions and think that they're just going to go away. And as we alluded to with the pebble in the shoe analogy, it ain't going anywhere. It's a matter of, do you want to take the pebble out now and deal with it? Or do you want to have a really sore foot, 2 hours from now because that pebble's done some major damage? Either way, you got to take the pebble out of your shoe. So let's just go ahead and deal with it now. So to me, those are two things that I don't think anyone would disagree with, but I also don't think many people live in alignment with.
So good. This has been such an impactful conversation. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, man, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for leading a great discussion.
You got it. I know, as people could tell, we could probably go for hours, but we both got to run. So Spartans, you know what to do. Share this episode far and wide. Remember that good and great are the enemies of possible. Lead like a Spartan today.